So, okay, you're not going to believe this, but I need to tell you about this trip I took last October. Me and my buddy Travis. You've met Travis, right? Big dude, always wearing that beat-up Carhartt jacket. Anyway, we decided to take a long weekend and drive up to this little town in northern Michigan. You know how it is up there in the fall. All the leaves are going crazy. It's that perfect sweater weather. Not too cold yet, but just cold enough that you want to wrap your hands around a hot coffee mug and not move. We'd been talking about doing a road trip for like 2 years, and we finally just said, forget it, let's go. So Travis finds this Airbnb up there. Now, I'll be honest with you, I usually don't pay that much attention to the photos when I'm booking a place. I'm just like, does it have a bed? Does it have a bathroom? Cool, sold. Travis is the opposite. He zooms in on every single picture, reads every review, cross-references it with Google Maps, the whole 9 yards. But this time, for whatever reason, he did not do that. He just sent me a link and said, $30 a night each, you in? And I said, yeah. That's how this whole thing started. The drive up was perfect. We hit the road early on a Friday morning, grabbed gas station coffee, got on I-75 and just headed north. The further up you go, the less there is. You start to lose radio stations, cell service gets spotty, the trees get taller and closer together, and it starts to feel like you're leaving regular life behind. I love that feeling, man. I really do. It's like the world just kinda exhales. We listened to old rock. Travis ate an entire bag of beef jerky by himself. We stopped at a little diner in Gaylord and had the best slice of pie I've had in my life. Cherry, with this thick flaky crust. I still think about that pie. And then we kept going north. We pulled into the town around 3 in the afternoon. I'm not going to say the name of the town because honestly I'm not sure I want people looking it up and connecting it to this. It's small, like maybe 400 people small. One main street, a bar, a gas station, a bait shop, a couple of churches. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody and a stranger rolls through and people just kind of watch you from their porches without waving. Not hostile exactly, just watchful. You know what I mean? The Airbnb was just outside of town, down a gravel road, set back in the trees a little bit. It was an old farmhouse, 2 stories. White paint that had seen better days. A big covered porch with a wooden swing on it. There was a lockbox on the front door with the code in the app, so we didn't meet any host or anything like that. Just the 2 of us pulling up, crunching over the gravel, looking at this old house. And I remembered Travis goes, this place has character. Which is what people say when something is kind of falling apart but they're trying to be positive about it. I laughed and said, yeah, character. But honestly, it was fine. Inside it was clean. Like whoever managed the place kept it clean. There was a living room with a fireplace, a couch, an old tube television that actually worked, a kitchen with basics, coffee maker, a few pots and pans, and then upstairs there were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom. Simple, comfortable enough. It smelled like cedar and something else I couldn't quite place. Almost like old paper, like a used bookstore or a library that hasn't been aired out in a while. Not bad, just old, like the house was holding its breath. We threw our bags down. Travis immediately claimed the bigger bedroom because he's Travis, and that's what he does. I took the smaller one at the end of the hall, and we decided to go back into town to check out that bar we'd seen on the main street. The bar was called Remy's. And I want to say right now, Remy's was great. Dark wood, mounted fish on the walls, a jukebox that still took quarters, and the bartender, older guy, maybe 60, big white mustache, was one of those guys who you can tell has heard every story there is and isn't easily impressed, but is still genuinely happy to pour you a beer. We sat at the bar and had a couple of local drafts and some kind of pulled pork thing that was way better than it had any right to be in a bar that small. At some point, the bartender asked us where we were staying, and Travis told him the address. I noticed something happen on the guy's face. It wasn't a big thing. It was just this small shift, this little moment where his eyes kind of settled and went flat, and then he smiled again and said, "Oh yeah, the Callaway place." Just like that. The Callaway place. I said, "You know it?" He said, "Everyone around here knows it. Old farmhouse. Been in that family a long time." He paused, wiped down the bar. "It's a good house. You'll be comfortable." And I thought, okay, that's a normal thing to say. I didn't think about it much more than that. We stayed at Remy's until maybe 9, got back to the house, started a fire in the fireplace because the night had gotten cold fast the way it does up north, and we just hung out. Travis found a stack of old board games in the closet, Monopoly, Clue, Scrabble, and we played Scrabble for a while even though neither of us is particularly good at it. It was a good night, easy and quiet in the way that nights away from the city tend to be. I went to bed around 11. I was tired from the drive, the beer, the food. I fell asleep pretty fast, and then I woke up at 3:17 a.m. I know it was 3:17 because I checked my phone immediately. I don't know why I woke up. There wasn't a sound that I could point to, no bang or crash. Just 1 second I was asleep, and the next I was completely awake, with my heart going a little faster than normal. You know that feeling? Where you wake up and you don't know why, but something in your body is already on alert? I lay there for a minute. The room was dark. There was a little moonlight coming through the thin curtains. The house was quiet. I told myself I probably just had to pee, which I did. So I got up and went down the hall to the bathroom, and that's when I saw the light. There was a third bedroom, or what I thought was a closet. It was at the very end of the hall past the bathroom, and the door had always been closed. I hadn't paid attention to it, but now there was light coming from underneath it. This thin yellow line of light, the kind you get from a lamp rather than overhead lighting. Like someone had a bedside lamp on in there. Now look, here's where my brain did what brains do. It immediately started explaining it away. Maybe it was a nightlight plugged into an outlet in there. Maybe the host had left a light on and it was on a timer. Maybe I'd just never noticed it before. All of these are reasonable explanations. My brain served them up like a bartender who doesn't want trouble. But I stood there in that hallway and I looked at that light for probably a full 30 seconds, and the thing I couldn't explain away was that it moved. Not like a light swinging from a cord, not like a flicker. It was more like the quality of it changed. Like the light source itself shifted slightly, like someone moved on the other side of the door and the lamp tilted a little. I went to the bathroom, splashed some water on my face, and went back to bed. I made a decision not to think about it. I'm pretty good at that. I went back to sleep. In the morning, I didn't say anything to Travis about it. We made coffee, he scrambled some eggs. We had breakfast and talked about what we were going to do for the day. There was supposed to be a good trailhead nearby, and we wanted to hike out to some overlook we'd seen mentioned online. The morning was sunny and bright, and the trees were absolutely on fire with color, and the whole thing with the door and the light felt like it had happened to a different person. It felt like maybe I'd half dreamed it. We hiked for most of the day. It was everything a fall day in northern Michigan is supposed to be: crunching leaves, cold air that smells like pine and lake water. Those long views from the ridgeline where you can see the forest roll out in every direction in orange and red and yellow, and you just feel really small and really glad to be alive at the same time. We didn't talk much on the trail, just walked, which is its own kind of conversation if you know someone well enough. On the way back into town, we stopped at a little antique store that was open on the main street. The woman running it was older, small, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and this incredible long silver hair. We were poking around looking at old stuff. Travis found a vintage hunting knife he got excited about, and at some point I ended up near the back talking to the woman while Travis negotiated over the knife. I mentioned we were staying at the Airbnb outside of town, the old white farmhouse on the gravel road, and she did the same thing the bartender had done. That small pause, that settling. "The Calloway place," she said. "Yeah, that's what the bartender called it too. Is that the family who built it?" She looked at me over her glasses for a second. Not unkind, just assessing, like she was deciding something. Then she said, "Elaine Calloway lived there for about 60 years. Just her in that big old house for the last 20 or so. She passed away about 3 years back." "Oh," I said. "That's sad." She was quiet for a second. She was a particular woman. Private. She didn't much like strangers in her house. She paused. It's strange to me that they're renting it out. I kind of laughed nervously and said, well, it seems fine. Clean, comfortable. She nodded slowly and said, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. And that was that. Travis bought the knife. We left. I didn't think too much about the conversation until later that night. That was the second night, and the second night is when things got harder to explain. We'd had dinner at Remy's again. At that point it was the only option in town, and honestly we weren't complaining, and gotten back to the house around 9:30. Travis wanted to watch something on the television, but the antenna reception was terrible, and the only thing that came in clearly was a local news channel showing weather, so we gave up and just talked, which was fine. We talked about work, about people we knew, about what we'd want to do differently if we could go back 10 years, all that stuff that you only really get into when you're away from your regular life. Around 11, Travis went up to bed. I stayed down by the fire a little longer. I'm a night person, always have been, and there's something about a dying fire that I just like to sit with. So I was down there alone, just watching the coals, and the house was quiet around me. Now here's what I need you to understand. I'm not a guy who scares easy. I've always been skeptical about this stuff. I've never had a paranormal experience that I could point to and say, yep, that's it, that's proof. I believe in rational explanations. I believe in my own perception being wrong before I believe in ghosts. I need you to know that because what I'm about to tell you is something I've spent months trying to rationalize and I'm running out of ways to do it. I heard footsteps upstairs. Not Travis. Travis is not a light walker. The man has a presence. You hear him. These were something else. Quiet, slow, deliberate. The kind of footsteps someone makes when they don't want to be heard. They went down the hall above me, past where I knew Travis's room was, past the bathroom, to the end of the hall where that closed door was. And then they stopped. And then I heard a door open. I sat very still. My heart was going. I tried to tell myself it was Travis getting up to use the bathroom, because that's a thing that happens. That's normal. But the footsteps hadn't stopped at the bathroom. They'd gone all the way to the end of the hall. I went up the stairs. I have no idea why. I think I was more curious than scared in that moment. I got to the top of the stairs and looked down the hall, and both Travis's door and the bathroom door were closed. And the door at the end of the hall, the one that was always closed, was open, just slightly, just a few inches, and the light was on. I walked down the hall, I pushed the door open, and it was just a room, a small bedroom, dusty, with old furniture, a single bed with a white coverlet, a nightstand, a lamp, old-fashioned stuff, like the room had been left exactly as it was, and nobody had touched it. There was a framed photo on the nightstand that I almost didn't notice, but I picked it up and looked at it. It was a black and white photo of a woman, middle-aged maybe, standing on the porch of the farmhouse. This farmhouse. She was looking directly at the camera with an expression that I can only describe as unhappy. Not angry, just not pleased, like someone had asked her to smile and she'd declined. The lamp was on. The lamp was definitely on. I reached out and touched the bulb and it was warm. Not warm like it had been on for hours, but warm like it had just been switched on. I stood there in that room for I don't know how long. Then I turned the lamp off, pulled the door closed, and went to bed. I did not sleep well. In the morning, our last morning, checkout was at 11. I finally told Travis about everything. The light the first night, the footsteps, the room. He listened without interrupting, which is not like Travis. When I was done, he was quiet for a second and then he said, "Dude, I thought I heard someone walking last night too. I figured it was you." We looked up the Airbnb listing while we were packing. We looked at it more carefully than either of us had when we booked it, and there in the description, right at the bottom, in small print that you would totally skim past, this historic home was built in 1887 and has been in the same family for generations. Guests report a cozy, nostalgic atmosphere. Some guests have noted that the home has a strong sense of its own history. A strong sense of its own history. I mean, come on. Travis read the reviews out loud while I loaded the car. Most of them were normal, beautiful area, cozy house, great for a weekend away. But there were a couple. One person wrote, and Travis read this verbatim. Lovely house, but had some strange experiences at night. Nothing scary, just the feeling that we weren't entirely alone. Wouldn't let that stop me from recommending it, though. Another one said, woke up both nights to the sound of footsteps in the hall. Assumed it was our group moving around, but later confirmed no one had gotten up. Interesting place, very old feeling. Nobody had flagged these. They were buried under a dozen perfectly normal reviews, and the listing had a 4.7 rating. Of course we hadn't seen them. We checked out at exactly 11, put the key back in the lockbox, walked to the car, and I turned around and looked at the house one more time before we left. Just the old white farmhouse, the covered porch with the wooden swing, the trees around it holding their colors, still and quiet in the thin morning light. I don't know what to tell you, man. I don't know if I believe in ghosts. I genuinely don't. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw, and I know that lamp was warm when I touched it in a room that was supposed to be empty and locked and dark. I know Elaine Calloway lived alone in that house for 20 years and didn't like strangers and then died there. And I know that somehow the house is being rented out on Airbnb now, and whoever is managing it put a very careful little note at the bottom of the description that basically says, haunted if you know how to read between the lines. Travis still has that hunting knife he bought at the antique store. He texted me a picture of it a few weeks after the trip and said, every time I look at this thing, I think about that house. I told him to stop. It's bad enough that I already think about it every time I smell cedar or old paper or feel the very first cold edge of October coming in. I don't regret going. That's the thing. Even after all of it, I don't regret it. Best pie I ever had. Beautiful trees. Good conversation with my best friend for 2 days straight. And Elaine, if that's who that was, if that's even possible. She didn't hurt us. She just wanted us to know that the house was hers. That it had always been hers, that no amount of Airbnb listings was going to change that. And honestly, I kind of respect it.